In this video, we'll be installing Comfy UI for Stable Diffusion, so let's get right to it. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so you don't miss any of our other videos. So Comfy UI is a node-based interface for Stable Diffusion, and you can see by the image on the screen here that it can look fairly complicated, but don't worry, we're going to demystify this entire thing for you. It's very easy to use. I find it just as easy to use as something like Automatic 1111, but I get much greater results. It's also much faster to run on your computer and doesn't require as big of a graphics card if you want really fast render times. In this video, we're going to set up Comfy UI for a very basic use just to get you started. In the next videos, we'll look at adding SDXL, which is an incredible model from Stable Diffusion. Also, we're going to look at workflows and we'll get into custom nodes later on, and you'll see that this thing is absolutely incredible. All right, so let's get to installing Comfy UI. Now, there's a few things you're going to want to have installed first. Whether you really need it for this installation or not, it doesn't really matter because we're going to use it in different videos as well. So it's worth doing. You can skip some of this if you really want to, and I'll show you the parts that you can skip. But we're going to go through, we're going to get everything set up. And this way, if you're coming from Midjourney and you want to try Automatic 1111, you have everything installed as well. So that way you can try different UIs and find what's right for you. Okay, so let's get started. First things first, we're going to need Python. So Python, this is one of the steps you can actually skip with the installation method we're going to use, because when programmers create these programs, they have an option to embed Python within the program itself, and that is what Comfy UI has done. However, it's nice to have it installed, and we're going to install the right version for Automatic 1111. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the downloads on the Python page here, and don't worry, all the links will be down below, and I'll link directly to where you can get this stuff. So what you're going to do is you're going to scroll down, and we're going to find 3.10.6. So there's 8.7.6. There we go. And we're going to download this file here. We want to make sure we're downloading the Windows installer 64-bit, and that's going to be the easiest way to install. Now, I've already downloaded everything and put it into my Stable Diffusion drive, so everything's already there. The next thing we're going to need is we're going to need Git. So Git is a program that talks to GitHub, which is where Comfy UI is actually housed. And the way that works is any files within GitHub is called a repository, and you can download that repository and set up simple commands to update that repository so you can automatically update programs when you first run them or something like that. So it's very, very good for getting the files from GitHub directly onto the computer with some very simple commands. We won't be using those commands today, but we will use them as we start looking at other user interfaces and using AI-driven pieces of programming in Python. We'll be downloading from GitHub using the clone, so it's good to have. So go ahead, go to Git, download it. You can see here you can choose for your operating system. In this case, we're using Windows, and you just want to download the 64-bit again. Okay, so now that we have those two things, we also have to go and get Comfy UI. So we're going to come to Comfy UI, and when you first load GitHub, you're going to see it like this. Scroll down, you'll see this image. Below that, you'll see Install Comfy UI, and you'll see installing for Windows is the first option. They're going to tell you the things that you need. They're going to recommend NVidia GPU. Also, they say you can run it on CPU only mode. I do not recommend that. It is extremely slow. You're looking at 2 to 3 minutes for any image generation in Stable Diffusion 1.5. And when we have an NVIDIA graphics card, you know, we can see very, very quick results. So you're going to be using a NVIDIA graphics card. We'll talk about that in a little bit as we're starting to unzip stuff and get stuff running. Okay, so first things first, you're going to click the direct download link. You're going to download a 7-zip file. If you do not have 7-zip, it is right here. Simply download and extract with 7-zip. You can click on that. It's going to bring you to the 7-zip website, and you can download that as well. Now I have 7-zip installed. I use it all the time. It's my favorite unzipping and zipping program. So I always have it installed on my machines. But if you don't have it, get it. It's worth having. Okay, so now let's go to our folder. Now you'll notice I have my own drive specifically for Stable Diffusion things. And the reason for this is I really forget to empty my output folder. So my drive can get quite full very fast. And I just don't want that on my main drive, gumming up my main drive. I'd rather have it on its own hard drive. I do have a desktop computer, so I have multiple hard drives in here, allowing me to do something like this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start by unzipping the Comfy UI. And like I said, it's 7-zip, so we have to use a different, you'll notice that Windows doesn't see the uncompress here. So we have to go show more. Now this is on Windows 11, on Windows 10, there is no show more. You go to 7-zip and extract here. And that's going to start the extraction process. And while we wait for things to extract and stuff, we're going to talk about hardware. So first things first, like I said, the main thing you want is an NVIDIA graphics card. You don't need to overdo it though. In this case, on this computer, I'm using a GeForce 3070. It works absolutely fine. Now, with something like Automatic 1111, it does run a little slow, but with Comfy UI, it's lightning fast. So you really don't need more than a 3070. And you can see brand new starting at $499. You can get them usually below 300 used. So it's definitely a card worth picking up if you're just getting started. If you do want things to work a little faster, there's a couple of options. You can go like to a 3080, 3090. And what you're looking to do is increase that video RAM. Now, in this case, the 4070 has a great card. That's a 12 gig card starting at only $600 American. It works great. I love that card. I haven't found the need to upgrade to it yet, so we're just going to stick with the 3070 for this example. And so we're running 8 gigs of video RAM, but the 4070 can have up to 12 gigs of video RAM, which is absolutely incredible. Okay, so next what we're going to do is we're going to install Python. So we don't need to do this with Comfy UI. We can just continue from this point with skipping this, but I do suggest that you have it installed on your computer. I'm going to show you the correct way to install Python, because once again, if it's embedded, it will only work for that program. You want to make sure that you have it on your computer. If we install something like Automatic 1111, it's already there. It can be used. It's fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to install it really quickly here. We're going to go to the Python installer. And what you want to do is add 3.10 to path, custom installation. Everything here is absolutely fine. We're going to click next. Install for all users. This is important because if you look without, it's going to put it in your app data. We don't want it in our app data. We want it in the root folder of C. So we're going to click that, and you notice it's not in the root folder. It's going to program files. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just remove that, and we're going to put it in the root of C. The reason why we do this is some programs are already set up in a way that it's looking for the C drive and the Python folder. This is a way to circumvent any issues that you have. Now, you also want to make sure that the association with files is checked, and that just makes sure that it's going to see Python files, be able to run them properly, and you want to make sure to add the environment variables as well if it's not already checked. It usually is, so you'll be fine with that. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to click install. So I just got my warning pop-up, and it's going to continue to install. At this point, we can talk about RAM in our computer. How much RAM should you have? In my case, I have 32 gigs of RAM. You notice down below, I might have Photoshop open or something like that. If I have Photoshop open, it does slow down my render times. So maybe having 64 gigs of RAM is a little bit better. However, generally I just close stuff down if I don't need it. If you have a lot of browser tabs open as well, that can cause some issues. But you'll see that it's still very, very quick for what I'm doing. Where I see the biggest difference is in Automatic 1111 and not in Comfy UI. But with Comfy UI, I still check my times. Generally speaking, in SDXL on Automatic 1111, I'm looking about a 30-40 second image render time compared to Comfy UI, which is about an 8-second speed usually. And if I have things open, it'll jump to about a 12 or 13 seconds. So just keep that in mind. That is the RAM usage of the computer. As far as the processor, it doesn't really matter because we're not running in CPU mode. Like I said, I don't recommend it. I have a 16-core, 32-thread processor in here, and legitimately, it is terrible. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to click close here. And that covers everything as far as hardware goes. Maybe get yourself a nice big hard drive because you're going to be rendering a lot of images. And once we get to SDXL, the images are a little bit larger as well. Standard Stable Diffusion 1.5 is trained on 512 by 512. And the lowest that SDXL is trained on is 1024 by 1024. So you're starting to get a lot larger images. And if you start upscaling, you can get quite ridiculously large images. For example, each image could be as high, if you're upscaling, each image could be as high as, say, 15 to 20 megabytes. So that can load up your machine really fast if you're running big batches. So just keep that in mind that you might want to change that a little bit. Okay, so now we have Comfy UI unzipped. We have Python installed. We have Git installed. So we have everything we possibly could need except for the model. So we need a model to start with. So what we're going to do is we're going to come to Civit AI, which is a place that you can download models, LoRa's, and different parts for Stable Diffusion. But in this case, we're just going to go to models, and we're going to look for a specific model. In this case, I'm going to be using DreamShaper. DreamShaper is one of the most commonly used models. You can download the model from Stable Diffusion. However, DreamShaper just gives us incredible results. So you can actually skip the other file and just go straight for this. And we can go ahead, we can download here. You can see that it's a safe tensor, meaning that it's been checked and it's safe to use. And we can go ahead and we can download the file. You can see it's 1.99 gigs. All the models are not small, they're huge files. So we can go ahead and download that. Another reason why you might want a large hard drive is if you work with a lot of models, you can see that it can take up quite a bit of drive space. Now the model is where the training images live, like how it knows what the subject is you're asking for. So when you change models, or in this case, this is known as a checkpoint, it has a lot of information, a lot of images trained within it, and a lot of data within it, so they can give you the results you're looking for. That's why these files can get so big. But right here we have DreamShaper, and all we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and we're going to copy DreamShaper. Okay, we're going to go into the Comfy UI folder that we just unzipped, and you can see here we have another Comfy UI. Now we have a few files here. We have run NVIDIA GPU. We don't want to do that yet, or run CPU. So that's if you want to run CPU mode or graphics card mode. You have an update folder. This updates anything from Comfy UI itself to all the dependencies as well. So if there's a version change and you need to update the dependencies, you can come here and do it. If you need to update later, you can come to the update folder. Next is the Python embed. This is what I was talking about. Python is embedded into Comfy UI, meaning you don't have to install Python. However, we did it anyways because we're going to be using other programs that might not be looking for an embed, and we might be working with other UIs that don't have it embedded as well. So we're just covering all our grounds here, but there's Python right there. And then we have Comfy UI's folder. We're going to click on that. We're going to go down to models, and we're looking for checkpoints. It's the first folder. And we're going to paste DreamShaper here. Okay, there we go. So DreamShaper is now in place, which means we have a model that we can work with, and we're all set. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go back a couple folders here, and we're going to run NVIDIA GPU. I'm going to double click this, and you can see here it has opened up what Comfy UI looks like. Now this looks very confusing, but don't worry, it's super simple. This is the default setup. If you're not sure, or you have something different, or you make a mistake, you can click the clear button, which will clear the workflow, and click load default. And you say, yeah, I want to do that. Now it brings back the default workflow already set up, so we don't have to do anything. So we have a few boxes here. These are called nodes, and we'll go through each one. So first node is load checkpoint. So this is where we're going to load the checkpoint. Now I've had this installed before, so it knows that I like to use DreamShaper. Yours will say null. All you're going to do is click on null and choose DreamShaper. You're going to get two boxes here. These are your prompts. Your top box is your positive prompt, and we can see that because the conditioning to the sampler goes to positive. And that's all these lines are indicating is where it's connecting to. And down here is connected to the negative. So what we can do is we can actually rename these. So I can call this positive prompt. There we go. And I can call this negative prompt. There we go. And for visual, we can make this even easier. We can go here, go to color, and make that green. And we can go here, color, and make this red. So we have our positive and our negative, and we can visually see what they are. The next box that we have below that is empty lane image. This is the information that the AI starts with to create our image, to choose what pixels are going to be what. So we have our size, which is 512 by 512. Now we're using Stable Diffusion 1.5 here, which is trained on 512 by 512. We have our batch size down here, although we're going to use batch size in a different place when we're generating, and I'll show you that when we get to it. All right, so in this box, we have the K sampler. And what the K sampler is all the settings that you may want to change. So that is your seed, and you have your seed control. So how do you want it to control it? Do you want it to be randomized, fixed, incremental, so on? So you can choose that here. And what incremental does is it'll change it by one step on the seed. We have steps, which is the number of steps you want the AI to run as it's creating detail. Your CFG, which you can set at 8, it's more than fine. Generally between 5 and 10 is kind of where you want to be. But this is how creative the AI is going to get with the image that it creates, or how close to the prompt it's going to be. You have your sampler name. By default, this runs on Euler. And we have our scheduler, which is set to normal. Now, if you're coming from automatic 1111, you know that a lot of us use DPM2 Keras, or a version of DPM2. And what's done here is that it's actually separate. So when we say DPM2++ Keras, DPM2++ is the sampler and Keras is the scheduler, but it's all done as one title. What we have to do here, if we want to do something similar, is we can click here and we get our whole list, and you can see we have DPM2. SD GPU is a really good one. There's a whole bunch here. And then under the scheduler, you see we have Keras here. Now we're just going to leave it as normal. We're going to use the Euler for now. Now, if you want Euler A, that's Euler Ancestral, which is right here. But Euler's fine for what we're doing. And then we have our denoise set to 1.0. Now, generally, if you're just doing basic generation, you don't really need to change anything here. And you're going to see the sample prompt that we have here in the positive prompt that we're going to get exactly what we're asking for. And we don't need to necessarily change anything here. Then we have our VAE decode. And what that's doing is that's decoding the information that the AI has created. You can see here that it's pulling the output from the sampler, and it's using the VAE, which it's grabbing from the checkpoint. And in more complicated setups, you may use a different VAE, but we're going to use the VAE from DreamShaper in this case. And finally, we have our save image. If we generate an image right now, it will save it to the outputs folder no matter what we do. However, we can change this box out for one that's called preview. What preview does is it doesn't save the image, it just previews it. So if you were doing some testing or something like that, you can have it so that it's not saving and taking up hard drive space, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to leave it as save image. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's get started creating our first image. So we have our prompt here, very, very simple. And what we're going to do is we're going to click Q prompt. Now, the first time it runs, it takes a half second longer, and that's because it's building the model. But every generation after that, if we don't change the checkpoint, it will be even faster. So you saw that generated in a pretty decent amount of time, which turns out to be about 2 seconds. But now, if I click it, you'll see that it goes straight from the prompt to the sampler to the saved image. So very, very, very fast. And we're down to about a 1 second, 1.5 second render time. And so we can go ahead and continue to render. Now, if we want to render multiples, we can go extra options, batch count. Let's say we want 5 images. And what we're going to do is we're going to click Q prompt. So we have 5 in the batch, Q the prompt, and now we have 5 in the queue. So now it's going to go and generate 5 images. Now these are saving, so they're not lost, but you'll notice that after each one's generated, we get our preview in our saved image box. But unlike automatic 1111, where you get a grid, you have to go to your output folder to see what you have. You can resize anything here. And what I'm doing here is I'm using my middle mouse button to move the interface around. And I can zoom in with my scroll wheel. And I'm going to go ahead and just expand that out so that I see the actual full rendering of what I've just created. Now, like I said, I like to do things a little different than a lot of people. People have their own way of organizing these nodes, but you can move these nodes around without affecting anything. So because they're tied through these lines, we can move this anywhere in the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move all this stuff up here, way up here. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a group. So add group, and I'm going to make a box that's big enough to hold both of these. And I'm going to drop them in the group. Okay, so there we go. And now I can move them together. And what I'll do is I'm actually just going to put this right above my image output. That way, when I'm working in Stable Diffusion, I can go prompt, generate, and see. So this way, I'm not having to, go back over here, change my prompt, scroll back over here. And I have very easy access to everything I'm going to change anyways, because my K sampler is right here. And now I can just click Q. It doesn't affect anything because once again, it's not where it is on the screen. It's what it's connected to through these lines. And if you're wanting to create your own workflows, you can kind of figure out pretty quickly where things go. So for example, load checkpoint has 3. There's model, clip, and VAE. And if we look, hey, look, that says clip. That says clip, right? We have those guides there to tell us where things connect. You notice here that there's nothing saying VAE on any of these, but there is one here. Well, VAE goes to VAE. So you're just connecting the lines. And this is the way that Stable Diffusion actually has its workflow, that it's going through each of these steps in these orders. Now you can add different nodes, all kinds of crazy nodes. If we click on nodes, you can see there's sampling, there's loaders, and we're going to go into this stuff a little bit later, but we're going to try and keep things fairly simple. I believe unless you're really wanting to play with some crazy stuff, we don't need to know what even most of this stuff does. Now, let's take a look at how to get to a node easily. So let's say by mistake, we right click on save and we remove it by mistake. What we can do is we can double click and we get a search box. We can say save. So we see here we have save image, which is exactly what we were looking for. Now let's say we want to preview the image. We type in preview image. We get our new box, image to image. There we go. And we're going to go ahead, increase our size. We'll send the queue through. And now it's previewing them. Now in preview, like I said, you're not saving to your output folder. But what happens if you really like this specific image? There's a couple of things you could do. One, we could go ahead and go to the seed and set it to fixed. Or we could right click and save image. So even though it's just a preview and it's not saving to the outputs folder, we can still save this image once it's generated. We can also preview it in a new window by going to open image. And you can see here, it is now in its own window, so you can get a good look at it by itself. And we can close that down and Comfy UI is right here. So that's the very basics of getting started with Comfy UI, so you can start generating some art. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions, put them down below. Remember, all links are down below, so it's going to be very easy to find all the stuff you need. And just follow this step-by-step guide, and you'll be up and running in no time. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more. And like I said, we're going to go into much deeper parts of Comfy UI. We're going to add SDXL next, and we're going to do some really crazy stuff so you get the best art generation possible. It's going to be really exciting stuff, and I hope you come along with the journey with us and enjoy AI art creation as much as we do. Have a great day. We'll see you again.